Okay, good evening. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to the Balkanies once again for hosting this shiur for the fathers of 7th grade in Perek Hasocher, 4th shiur. And we are holding in Perek Hasocher, Maseches Bava Metzia, that is Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. There's the narrow lines in the Gemara before they get wider. So we're holding where it's like the third to last narrow line, the two dots where it says Rashbag, which is the Rosh Tevis from Shimon and Gamliel Eimer. So that's what we're holding. So before we start reading inside, just a brief catch up to where we're holding, very brief. We don't have to delve into last week's shiur to be able to follow today's shiur. We just have to recap a brisa that we mentioned in last week's shiur. Our Mishnah, in the beginning of Perek Hasocher, our Mishnah said some kind of extra words, which is unusual for a Mishnah. The Mishnah, after saying the whole story, if a worker backs out on the owner backs out on the worker, and whoever changes, and the Mishnah adds at the end, whoever's the one who backs out, whoever's the one who, after we have a deal, backs out of the deal, he has the lower hand, and the other guy has the upper hand. So the Gemara wanted to know, what's this, who are we adding? So he said, one of the answers of the Gemara was that we're adding a sale, not a worker and a buyer, but we're adding when there's a sale. If I want to sell you a property, we make up, I'm selling you this $1,000 field, and the guy in the meantime doesn't pay up fully, he only pays up around $200. Then after he gives the $200, he says, you know what, let's cancel the deal. I don't want to do this deal. So it depends who backs out. So the Tanakama and the Brisa says, and this is the part that we need to know for today's Gemara, the Tanakama and the Brisa said that whoever backs out of his sale, he has the lower hand, the other guy has the upper hand. So if the buyer is the one backing out, and he already so far paid $200 towards the field, and he says, forget it, cancel the deal. And he's backing out, so the seller has the upper hand. So the seller either could say, you want to back out of this deal, take your money back. Or if the seller prefers, he could say, here's $200 worth of property. He has the upper hand. He could choose to either give him back his cash or give him $200 worth of property because the guy already paid $200. And he could say, too bad on that part you already paid for. And if it's the seller who backs out, so then the buyer has the upper hand. The buyer could insist, you don't want to sell me the whole field, forget it. I don't want this deal. I want my cash back. Or the buyer can insist and say, give me $200 worth of property. And the Mishnah throws in, the Brisa throws in, that when the buyer wants to get $200 worth of property, or if the seller owes him $200 and doesn't have the cash anymore, and he has to then pay him through his assets, which is his property, the seller has to give him what's called idis. He has to give him from his best properties. That's what the Brisa says. And then the Brisa continues, Rabbi Shimon and Gamliel, says, introduces the concept of a mortgage. That's essentially what he does. He says, we don't want all these stories with a buyer and seller backing out on the dispute and it was upper and lower end. We teach people who are doing a sale to frame the sale differently. They should make a shtar. He says specifically, you should write a shtar. And it's just say in the shtar that the sale's final, the sale's complete, and we're selling you $1,000 field for $1,000. So for $200 of it was paid up, it's a down payment, and the other $800 is a loan that the seller is giving the buyer a loan to be paid up over time. But the sale is 100% complete. That's what Rav Shimon Gamliel introduces in that brisa, which is what everybody does now when they buy a house and it's a mortgage. It says specifically that you should write you should write it down. So now that was the intro. So now actually I made a mistake where when I started a minute ago, I said we're holding Rashbag. You got to go a couple of lines up. We're really holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8 lines up from that. The line starts with the word kama, and we're holding Amar Mar. We're holding Amar Mar. So Amar Mar is an expression. Amar Mar literally means like Mar said, like, our master taught us, or like so-and-so taught us. But it's an expression the Gemara uses when we're quoting a brisa that was brought down in the Gemara. Now we want to analyze that brisa for what it is. We'll say Amar Mar. The way we teach in yeshiva is Amar Mar, we previously learned in a brisa. That's or in the Mishnah. So but the literal translation of it is like Mar said. So Amar Mar said that Mehechan Magbiyai, in the case where the Lekeach wants to get $200 worth of the property, where does he get it from? Min ha'idis, he gets it from the best property that the guy has. The guy could have many, many properties. They could have all of different qualities. I could give you a $200 value of Edis property. I could give you $200 value of lesser quality property. He has to get the best property. Because Al Kadaitach, the Gemara assumes, that what we mean is he has to give you from his best property that he has available. So we're going to pause here for a brief hakdama. There's three types of properties. There's idis, which means the best. Beinus, which means average. Ziburis, which means the worst. Good evening. For joining. So there's three types of properties. Mina Torah, if I, let's say, owe you money, and I don't have money to pay you, I need to give you my properties. I could give you my ziburis, Mina Torah, which means the value I need to pay you back is the same $100 that I owe you, or the same $200 that I owe you. But I could give you 200. Let's say I owe you $1 million. I could give you a house in Crown Heights, or I could give you like a farm in somewhere in the outback in Texas, right? So one of them is maybe considered idis, one of them is maybe considered beinus. Different property might be considered ziburis. It's the same value. I have to pay back what I owe you, but what type of property am I giving you? So there's three types of properties: idis, beinus, and ziburis. Mina Torah, when I owe you money, I could give you a ziburis. I can give you the worst type of property. Mina Torah, it says clearly that if I damage you and I owe you money, let's say my ox, caused damage to your property or to you and I owe you money. So if I'm a mazik, I have to pay meitav. I have to pay from the idis. Meitav sadeu, meitav karma, I have to pay the best. That's the halacha of Mina Torah. Now this price has said that in the case where a buyer backs out on the seller backed out on the buyer, and the buyer had already paid $200 towards the $1,000 property. So the buyer, because he has the upper hand, the seller backs out. So because the buyer has the upper hand, he can insist on taking property, at least $200 worth that he already paid. Now that the seller backed out on the deal, fine, the deal's dead. But the $200 that I already paid, the buyer has the upper hand to insist, please give me $200 worth of land. And the Brisa said, which land does he get? He gets from the idis. Now, the Gemara is saying that when we say idis, we're assuming not the specific land that was being sold. We look at the guy's whole portfolio, all his fields, all his assets, all his property, and this buyer now gets to choose the $200 value of the best property that this seller has available. So that's what the Gemara assumes the Mishnah means when he says pay him from the idis, not from the idis of this field, idis of his idis, wherever it may be, whether it was the field that was actually for sale or not. So the Gemara is going to wonder, why should this guy get from the idis? Let him at least have the din of a bal chayiv. If I owe you money and I need to pay you back, the din is mina Torah, I could pay you ziburis. Chachamim made a special halacha that a bal chayiv should pay back beinus because they didn't want people to stop lending money. I lend you money, you don't have the cash, you give me back, you give me your ziburis field. Chachamim were worried that it's going to close the door on lenders. Lenders won't want to lend. So the Chachamim made it takana that a bal chayiv pays back beinus. And again, a mazik pays idis because that's clearly in the Torah. So why should this guy have to pay idis? Let him at least have the regular din of a bal chayiv. Even a bal chayiv pays only beinus. We don't prop him up to the level of idis. So that's what we're holding. We'll start again from Amar inside. Again, the line starts with the word kama. About 10 lines towards the bottom of the narrow lines and the lines in the base. So Amar, we previously learned in the Brisa, where does this buyer get to demand his $200 worth that he already paid towards the property? Meaning this, he gets it from the best field possible that the seller owns. We are so far assuming from the best idis that this person has. Why should this person get idis? Let him have just the din of a regular bal chayiv. We learned clearly in a Mishnah that a bal chayiv, dina bebeinis, that a bal chayiv gets paid with beinis, and the reason why he's supposed to get zavuris. But the reason why the Chacham said beinis is that people should still be willing to lend money, knowing that they'll get paid back in beinis. And not just that, for the Gemara over here we have the land that he paid for. It's not like I owe you money, so now, okay, I don't have cash to pay you. Let's go to my lands. Which land should I pay you from? You have a question. Should I pay for my best land, my highest level, my lowest level? Idis, bein, ziburis. Here, it was a sale of land. So there's nothing really in question here. First of all, why should he get idis? That's our first question. Our second question is, just give $200 of the land that was meant to be sold. This was a transaction, a sale of land. The guy backed out of the deal, but he's forced to keep 20% of the deal and give him $200 worth of land of the $1,000 deal. Okay, just give from that land. There's no question of which lands should we look at. This is the land. So that's what the Gemara is adding. We have this piece of land that the money was given for. So just let's use that land. Why go to Idis and why go anywhere? Just use this piece of land that we have. So and for the Gemara, we misunderstood the Brisa. Amar of Nachum bar Yitzchak, Idis sheba u'miziburis sheba. The Mishnah meant, if let's say it was $1,000, it was meant to be $1,000 sale for a huge piece of land. And the land itself, parts of it are better, parts of it are worse. And now we want to know, you have to give him only $200 worth of this land, taka. It doesn't make sense that he should go to the idis of the rest of his property, and it doesn't make sense to go to any other properties. This is the land that was meant to be sold. So now that the guy's forced to keep the deal for $200 worth of this land, within this land itself, we're saying give him the best piece. That makes sense. Midis shaba, umzibur is the ba. Ravacha breder Ravika Amar, Ravacha the son of Ravika says. Interesting. He says something interesting. I'll read it inside and then I'll explain. Afilu tema. You could even learn that the Brisa did mean that the person must pay from his best land available, not from this specific piece of land, but you go and look at it, all his lands, and you take from the best land available. Why? Stam man de zavin arab alpha zuzi. We assume stam, a person, meaning the regular case of a person who's buying such an expensive piece of land for elef zuz, azuli moizil umaz ben chase. He had to sell other lands for cheaper. I'll explain in a moment. Bahavali kinizik, and now this person is as if somebody who got damaged. Utnan hanizak and shamlam beidis, the people who got damaged got paid with idis. So the first answer to Gemara is taka. You only pay with the land that was in question, but from that land itself, the best piece. Rav Acha Dervika offers another explanation. He says that the Mishnah meant taka, that the seller who backed out on the deal has to now give $200 worth of property from his best property out there. Not from the land that was in sale. The buyer, because now he has the upper hand, could choose the $200 Edis field. Why? Because this buyer is like a nizik. He's as if somebody who got damaged. Because our assumption is that anybody who's buying a property for elef zuz for a lot of money, probably, how did he come up with so much cash? He probably owned smaller properties. He had opportunity to buy this more expensive property. So he sold all those properties, but he was under pressure. So he couldn't wait out for the market to try to get the highest bidder. He might have sold them even below market value because he needed the cash. And now when he went and he bought this property, I'll give you an example of a guy here in Crown Heights, right? Baruch Hashem, I was fortunate to have this example that I'm about to tell you. I originally owned a co-op on Kingston Avenue. They have co-ops on 446 Kingston, right? Then I had to sell it to trade up to buy the house where I'm Baruch Hashem fortunate to live. So when I sold the co-op, I was under pressure because I found the house that I liked. I signed the contract. I needed the money. So I'm not going to get the best price possible because I'm not going to wait it out. I'm not just, this is, I might sell it for below value. And this happens to people all the time. But when you want to trade up or you have an opportunity, you have to liquidate your assets. You go for what you got, and you might sell something for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 below market value. So we're assuming that this guy who went to buy a property for $1,000, what did he have to do first? He had to get rid of all his little co-ops or all his little properties that he owned, and now he came to make this big sale, and he bought this $1,000 field because it's valuable for him to have this one big huge field. So he sold all his properties at a loss. Now he comes and he makes a sale. He's buying this $1,000 property, and he gives already the $200, and now the seller backs out. So now that the seller backs out, this guy he lost out on everything. He lost all his properties that he sold perhaps below market value, and now this sale he doesn't get either. So he's considered like a nizik. So therefore, when he gets paid back the $200 that he actually paid for, and we say he has a right to demand land for it. So then when he gets paid back those $200, he could choose the best land that this guy has because we treat him like a nizik, and we learned that a mazik, it's a clear pasuk in the Torah, a mazik has to pay idus. Now Tosfos explains we don't consider him like an actual nizik, like he's somebody who got damaged, like he lost so much money. Because then the seller wouldn't just have to give him $200 worth of the land. We would have to make a cheshbon how much money this guy lost. Like he actually maybe really lost. We would have to reimburse him. So we don't go that far. It doesn't work like that, where I have to reimburse you and you could claim, had I not sold that smaller property to be able to buy this big property, I would have been able to sell it for more. And
why do you say that about the deal before?
Why do we?
Originally, the guy comes and he says, "This works for when the buyer backs out," and that's. Yeah, the seller is all good enough. This is now you're coming to me and you're saying you don't want it. I had 3 other people that came and looked, and I turned them down.
Perhaps you could say it that way.
But you're saying that he only
so when the buyer backs out, we weren't talking about that case right now. The Mishnah, the Brisa did, but when the buyer backs out, the seller does get some kind of upper hand. He could choose to give him a piece of land, and if he has a buris, or he can say, here's your cash back. He can do whatever works best for him. Whatever works best for him, we do give him an upper hand. But in this case, we're considering the guy who was planning to buy and wanted to buy because he was buying such an expensive property, because the Brisa talks about $1,000 field and the guy gave $200, we consider him a victim. But Taisus has to clarify, we don't consider him like a mamish, a victim, because then the seller would have to actually reimburse him for all his losses. We don't go that far, but at least we consider him a victim to the extent that the $200 worth of land that the seller now owes him, this guy could choose idis, not just idis of the field that was meant to be sold. I could go to any of your fields and take $200 from the idis, the best field that you possibly own. That's what the Gemara is saying. That's what Rav Acha Brei Darvika is answering. Okay, we're ready to move on to the next shtickle Gemara. It's like a new shtickle. So Reb Shimon and Gamliel, we have two dots now. We're quoting the Brisa. Reb Shimon and Gamliel is the one, like we just said before, but for the people who came, we'll just go over it. Reb Shimon and Gamliel is the one who taught us the mortgage. He doesn't want to have all these disputes that I'm selling you a field and I give you some of the money and you backed out, or you backed out on me, I backed out on you. He doesn't want that. So he says whenever you sell a field, even if the guy's only giving $200 out of the $1,000 of the payment, the $200 is a down payment. Sign a star, make the sale completely final. No one's able to back out on anybody. It's a good sale, and the $800 that is owed should be considered a milva, should be considered a loan. That's what Shimon Gamliel says, and the way he said it in the Brisa is that you have malam d'maisam shelo yachzuru. We teach them, we train them that they shouldn't back out on each other. Rather, Kate said, what should you do? Kaisev light. You should write a star, and he describes what the star should say. Ani pleni ben pleni. So now we have a question from Shimon Gamliel. So it's classic Gemara. We're quoting the two dots of Shimon Gamliel. We learned in the Brisa. There is Shimon Gamliel said, Malam dinaisan, that we train them, shelo yachzuru, that they shouldn't back out on each other. Kate said, rather, what do we do? Kaisev lai. You should write a star. Ani pleni ben pleni, and it's the mortgage. Correct the Gemara. It seems from this Brisa, the reason why it's a final sale and why that works, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's trick works, the cost of lehachi, because it was written down and you made a proper star that said clearly this is a final sale and these $200 are going towards like a down payment, the rest is a loan. Like cost of hachi, but if you wouldn't write it down the way Reb Shimon ben Gamliel teaches you in this Brisa to do it, like honey, it wouldn't be considered a final sale. It would be like the Tanakama says, where the guy could still back out because he wasn't paid up in full. I could back out, you could back out. If he backs out, he has the upper hand. If he backs out, he has the upper hand. But the only way Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's strategy, the only way his trick, his hack works, is if you write down this, you make a mortgage document. That's the only way it works. That's what it seems. Frakti Gemara, from a Brisa that we're about to learn, it's going to be implied that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel does not require you to write it down. It works even if you don't write it down. Meaning, I say, here's this field for $1,000. Do you want to buy it? The guy says, sure, gives $200. There's no clear mortgage written up. And it's going to be implied from this Brisa that we're about to learn, that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds that those $200 are considered a down payment, and the $800 is considered a loan. In other words, essentially a mortgage without writing it down. So we have a stira of two Reb Shimon ben Gamliels.
The second case is when he gave him the full only down payment, or he gave the full value?
Which second case? This is the Brisa that we're about to learn,
Yeah.
where he gave only a certain amount. But the Brisa is not talking about a regular down payment. I'm stopping here. I need to make a little intro for the Brisa. But I want to give you a heads up of what the question that's coming our way is. The question that's coming our way is a classic question. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel on the Brisa that we had says you need to write it down. From the Brisa that we're about to learn, it's going to seem that you don't need to write it down. We're going to have a contradiction. But this Brisa has a little more details that we need to get into. So this Brisa has an interesting story. It's a story where we want to make a deal, we want to make a sale. And in order to make the sale, we give a guarantee. So let's say you're selling me, a piece of land. And we want to make this binding. We want to say that we're not going to back out on each other. So I give you something expensive, right? I give you my $500 phone. And I say, this phone is a mashkin by you. This is not the sale. This is not the payment. This is just like a mashkin. And this phone is a mashkin by you. And if I back out on the deal, you get to keep the phone. It's just like a guarantee that that I'm serious. Yeah, collateral. And the other guy, the seller also says, and if I back out on the deal, I'm going to have to give you back 2 phones, right? And I have to pay back double. So that's just a way of when you promise, you want to show how serious you are. You kind of talk big. You're like, yeah, if I'm not going to do this, I'm going to lose, right? I'm going to take a hit. So in the lashon of the Chazal, that's called an asmachta. It's like an exaggeration, maybe you could call it. And there's a machlekes of Tanaim if it's binding or not. Like if you really meant it. Like if I back out on the deal, do I really lose my phone? or I didn't mean it. I only spoke in such a strong language because I actually was so serious about buying the property that I was saying it in such a strong way. I'm willing to lose my phone, but I wasn't really relying on the fact to lose my phone. So I wasn't really mocking the phone to you because I never really wanted to lose my phone if I back out on this deal. So it's a machlekes tanaim if you speak like that, like if you make this kind of bet, let's call it, if you exaggerate that way, are you serious or not? So one opinion holds smachta kanya, it works, and I lose my phone, and if that guy backs out on the deal, he has to give me back too. This is legit. What you said is what's going to happen. The other opinion is a smachta like kanya. It doesn't work that way. So that's the machlekes that we're going to see here. We're going to see the machlekes of smachta kanya like kanya between two tanaim, and then Rav Shimon Gamliel is going to jump into that brayso as well, and then we're going to have our question. So let's see it inside. So Zak the Gemara, we're holding on the first wide line. Vatanya, we learned in a brayso, if somebody gives a mashkin collateral to his friend, and he says, if I'm the one who backs out on the deal, you can just keep my mashkin. That's how serious I am about this deal. If I back out, you keep that item. And the seller says, if I'm the one who backs out, I'm going to double the mashkin back to you. So the Tanakama, which is Rabbi Yossi over here, he says, Niskaimu hatanaim. These conditions will remain in place. They're binding. They're real. We have to keep them. Divrei Rabbi Yossi. These are the words of Rabbi Yossi. Now, the Gemara takes a little break. We're in the middle of reading a brayso, but now comes Gemara words, not brayso words. The Gemara interjects. And the Gemara says, why does Rabbi Yossi hold that? Because Rabbi Yossi l'tamei, Rabbi Yossi is following his opinion, the Amar, which he holds, asmachta kanya, that an asmachta is kinda. It's a binding agreement. But now the brayso continues. Rabbi Yehuda, so it was machlekes to Rabbi Yossi, and now comes Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. These are Tanaim. Rabbi Yehuda says, Daya sheyikne keneged ervainai. Rabbi Yehuda holds, so let's explain. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a smachta is like kanya. So if I back out of the deal, I'm not going to lose my phone that I gave you, and that guy's not going to have to pay me back 2 phones if he backs out of the deal. But Rabbi Yehuda says, at least let's view it that this $500 item is at least a payment towards part of the. I didn't mean that I'm going to lose this, but I meant like I'm starting to pay you up already. Like this is going to be a payment towards the deal. So if now you back out on the deal after I already gave you my phone, $500 of this, whatever, let's say we're buying $1,000 field, $2,000, whatever the price was, this amount that my mashkin is worth, the $500 phone, that much is going to be a real kinyan, and I acquire that much of your field. So in other words, he holds a smachta loy kanya, not that the deal falls apart and I lose my phone, or if the deal falls apart and that guy doesn't need to give it to me, but we mean that it's at least binding enough that the deal will be in effect for the amount of the mashkin. So if I back out now, the deal falls apart to an extent, but the part of the deal that's at least keneged, equal to the amount of the mashkin, will be in effect. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda.
And what about the seller? The seller has to pay double amount.
Yeah, I guess the seller will have to. No, the seller will not, because he holds a smachta like kanya. But the seller will at least have to do the $500, right? It can't be that he'll have to do double, because he holds a smachta like kanya. So none of them really meant to lose $500 or lose it, right? Yeah, no, that guy was only going to lose $5 because he got the mashkin. He was going to give back 2, so he was also only losing 5. Right. No one's going to lose money. No one meant that. It's a smachta like kanya. But at least the deal for this amount will go through, will be valid. So that's what he holds. So how much of the deal goes through? The amount that the collateral was worth. That's what Rabbi Yehuda explains. So now Rabbi Shimon Gamliel chimes in. So the brayso continues. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, when is it that the amount of the deal that goes through is only the amount that the collateral was worth? Only if he told him that that my mashkin should seal this deal. If he said those words, that my mashkin should seal this deal. Now, obviously, if I say my mashkin should seal this deal, I don't mean that you're going to have to give me the whole field just for the mashkin. I didn't pay you up, because nobody would agree to such a deal that I'm going to buy $5,000 property for a $500 phone. So it meant at least the value of the phone, the value of the mashkin. But if I sold you a property for Elav Zuz, and I gave you $500, so then Kana, the sale goes through. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, if I'm selling you a property for $1,000, where it's not a collateral, and I actually started paying There was real payment, not a collateral story. Then we say they only get the amount according to the collateral. He agrees basically with Rabbi Yehuda. But if it's not a case of collateral, it's a case of where I'm buying a field for 1,000 and I started paying and I paid half, the deal is complete. The deal is sealed. And I owe you $500. That $500 is a chayiv, but no one has a right to back out anymore. In other words, it's a mortgage. The sale is complete, the down payment was made, and the money that's not paid up yet is a loan. Like what he said in the Brisa we learned before. But over here, he doesn't say that you need to write it down. That's what happens here. Rav Shimon Gamliel over here says, that the only part of the deal is the amount of the mashkin is when we're dealing with a mashkin. So we have a stira. Shimon Gamliel in the Brisa higher up in this page that we quoted, it says you have to write the mortgage. And here he says it's like a davar pasha that's how sales go. And for the Gemara, it's not a contradiction. It's different cases. Loi kasha. One of these prices are talking about where the seller keeps him coming back, right? He didn't get paid up in full. He only got part of the money. Keeps him coming back. No, you have the money. Next day he comes on that, you have the cash for me. You have the cash for me. And one seller doesn't keep on harassing him. What's the difference? When a seller keeps him coming for money, he's revealing to us the intent that he had for selling it. He needed the cash. So if he's not going to get the cash, he doesn't want the sale. The only reason why he liquidated this property and sold it is because he needs cash. That's why he looks desperate. That's why every day he says, "No, you have the money for me. You have the money for me." So such a guy, it's called ayal v'nafik. He keeps going in and out for the money. Keeps on going in and out. So such a guy is revealing to us his intent is that he needs cash. So if he doesn't get the cash, he has a right to back out on the sale, unless he wrote a mortgage. If you wrote a mortgage, too bad. You actually wrote down clearly that this is a final sale and the rest is a chayiv. You could collect your chayiv from today to tomorrow. You have to harass your Baal chayiv to pay you up. So in the case of Ayal V'Nafik Gazuzi, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that because the seller it's clear that the seller only sold because he wants cash. If he doesn't get the cash, he has a right to back out. In that case, he tries to teach us, please write the mortgage, so we shouldn't have any stories. But in a regular case where I sell you the field and I pay you up half and I don't keep on coming in for the money, which is called Loika Ayal V'Nafik Gazuzi, over there, it's a good sale. And the guy was selling for other reasons, not because he was desperate for cash. And the money that he's owed. It's like a mortgage. And over there, it does not need to be written down. That is the answer that the Gemara gives. That the two Rashbags, which seem to be a contradiction, the case is different. There's Ka'ayal V'Nafik Gazuzi and like Ka'ayal V'Nafik Gazuzi. Once we mention that, we're going to mention some other dinim where you have a guy who's Ka'ayal V'Nafik Gazuzi. And we're going to now go through a couple of dinim where a guy pays up partially or a guy pays up in an interesting way. And that the Gemara is going to go off on that now for a little bit. So let's do that inside.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
The first Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that we saw
Insisted that you write it down.
was for people who.
Well, let's first say what he said. He insisted that it has to be written. Why? Because that's a guy. In that case, it was a guy who was kept them going in and out for the money. So it's clear that the whole reason why he sold his property is because he wants cash. So if you can't come up with the cash, the sale's void.
But once it happened, what is it? It's too late to write it down.
No, so that's why in that case, he'll agree that it will only be a mortgage if it was written.
In the case where the guy needed the money, and that's why he sold it, it's only a mortgage.
If it was written down. Because if it wasn't written, the sale is actually void. Because it's clear that you didn't satisfy me. Like I sold it because I needed cash. You're not giving me the money. But in the case where the guy's not Kyle Benafik Gazuzi, he enacts the mortgage clause without having the mortgage. Right. Okay.
Meaning that one of them could back out if they want to, and then they have the whole thing of the Gemara from the previous Gemara.
The Gemara that insisted that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Brisa where he insisted it's written down, is in a case where the guy is Kyle Benafik Gazuzi, because he agrees that in that case, if it would not be written mortgage, you could back out on the sale.
And then somebody suffers. Whoever backs out suffers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whoever backs out has the lower hand. That would like what the Tanakh over there said.
Right.
Okay, so now once we mentioned that, we're like, oh, this is very good. This is how we're resolving the contradiction between Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and one Brisa and in another Mishnah. This works very well with something that an Ameira taught us. The Rava said, "Hi man, the Zabin Midil Chabrei, somebody who sold something to his friend, and he didn't get paid up in full. And he's going in and out to keep on pursuing his money. Like honey, the sale doesn't go through. The guy came back, I said, listen, you're not paying me up, the sale is done. However, like if we don't see that the few days following the sale, he's not after his cash, so then Kani, then the property is final. The sale goes through. So Rava said that as a straight up din, and this way to resolve the contradiction of Rashbag supports that very much. So now, once we mentioned that din of Rava, we're going to do what the Gemara does now with a vav v'amar Rava. Another din about Rava on this topic about partial payments. So v'amar Rava, and Rava says as follows: somebody who loaned $100 zuz to his friend, and he paid him back $1 at a time. Right? It's a little annoying. I lend you $100, and then you come to me, give me $1, give me another $1, and another single $1, and you keep on paying me back. So there's these partial payments. So Zatrava Pirainava. It's a valid payment. It's a good payment. Ella the Isle terms gabe, you could have complaints on the guy. You could be upset. You could be upset, but you were paid back. It's valid. Why could you be upset? The Amalei, because you could tell the guy, if Saditina Minahi, because of you, I lost my $100. Why? Because if somebody gives me back $100, I put the $100 away. I put it in my bank account. If you give me $1, I spend it on a coffee, on a soda, right? If you have $1 in your pocket, it gets lost. If you have $100, it doesn't get lost. So the guy who paid back, it's considered a valid payment. You can't go to Bezdin and say he never paid me back. He cheated me. No, he gave you $100. Could you be upset? Could you have tinnitus? Yes, you can. Did you actually end up losing out? Yes. You could have been more careful also at the same time, right? So now we're going to have another story, also a story about where there's partial payments over here. Ahu Gavra, there's a person, the Zabin Le Chamara Lechavre. So it's important to read the words over here, Chamara. Rashi over here says that we're talking about a donkey. Because in the Gemara, Chamra can mean wine in the Gemara. So here we're talking about a Chamara. So Ahu Gavra, the Zabin Le Chamara Lechavre. Somebody sold a donkey to his friend, and he paid the guy up. Upash Le Chad Zuzabi. $1 not. So it was $100 sale. He paid him $99. He still owes him $1. And now what happened? And this guy was going in every day. Where's my dollar? Where's my dollar? Do you have my dollar? You owe me $1. And he was kind of guy. So they were wondering, Yasif Ravashi was sitting and he was like, analyzing this case. Means that he was analyzing this case. I'll tell you a cute story about Ma'ayin. Ma'ayin literally means you looked into it, right? You analyzed it. I'll tell you a story in a second. So Yasser Ravashi was sitting and he was being Ma'ayin in this case. Ki hai governor Mai, in such a case, what will be the din? Kani or like Kani? Is it going to be kind or not? Because on one hand, he's Ayal v'nafik azuzi. On the other hand, he only has $1 left from the $100 sale. Did he really mean that the whole sale should be void because he wasn't paid up in full? So he wasn't sure. He was Ma'ayin in this case. He was analyzing, wants to know what the halacha will be. The cute story is, one time in our 5th grade, a kid asked the question to his teacher. It was a very good question. Teacher didn't know the answer. The teacher was thinking, so he said, tell me the question again. He listens to the question, tells the kid it's an excellent question. Right? Which literally means you got to look into it. So the whole class said, what? Nobody knew what ma'ayin means. So the teacher was a little surprised. Nobody in the class knows what ma'ayin means. So he asked the class, does anybody know what ma'ayin means? Nobody. Think, what does it mean to be ma'ayin into something? So one kid raises his hand. He says, it means half. It means to do half. The teacher says, what's up is half? He says, what do you mean? In yeshiva, we have a yom iyun. It's a half a day of school. Now, for that kid, I'm proud of that kid because it was good thinking. He was trying to reference where else does he know the word. Now, why is it called the yom iyun? Because when we give the kids a half day of school, it's the teachers are there to have a yom iyun, a day where we prove our practice and we get involved into the subject of teaching. So it's called the yom iyun. But for that kid, yom iyun means a half a day. So on one hand, he used the seichel the most. On the other hand, obviously, he was off track. So anyways, Ravashi was being ma'ayin, and what's the din of this case where there's $1 left? So Zakti Gemara, Ravashi, so Mardechai tells Ravashi, Hachi Amar Avimi Mahagrunya Mishmei de Rava. This is what Avimi from Hagrunya said in the name of Rava. Zuzah kezuzei dami. One zuz is like multiple zuz. Singular zuz is like plural zuz. V'loi kani. In other words, the same way the halacha is that if somebody's ayal v'nafik azuzi, it's like honey. Zuzah kezuzei. If it's just for $1, it means the guy needs every dollar, and if he's not satisfied till he gets the last dollar, it also works. Correct. Zakti Gemara, Amli Ravach B'Der Vesler Rashi, Baravacha tells the son of Resa tells Ravashi, Amrina Mishmei Rava Kani. But we say in the name of the same Rava that it will be kinda. So there's like a little bit of a contradiction. Avimi Megraino says in the name of Rava that one zuz is like kizuzi and it's going to be like honey. But we have also that that we learned in the name of Rava that it is going to be kind of. So, and for the Gemara, I'll tell you how to reconcile that seems to be a contradiction in Rava's din. I'll tell you how to understand that. Amarlei to targim shmaitich b'meicher sadeyu mipnei ra'asa. And when Rava said, the version that you have of Rava, where Rava said you're kind of, even though the guy's Alv enough Gazuzi, that's talking about a separate case. That's talking about sometimes somebody sells a property because it's bad. He knows that there's no potential. He knows maybe that the zoning laws are going to change, whatever, however you want to call this property bad. So he wants to offload this property. He wants to get rid of it before anybody chops, right? So he puts it up for sale and somebody buys it. This guy then is going in and pay me up. He's not desperate for the cash. It's not why he sold. We know that the reason why he's so desperate to get the cash, he wants the sale to be final, to be complete, because he doesn't want the guy to get that insight and to maybe want to back out and realize that this was a bad deal, this was a bad field, this was I understand why this guy wanted to sell it, right? Whenever somebody sells a house, you're always wondering why they want to sell. Is there something wrong with the house? You're always like extra cautious, right? So this guy, the way Rashi says it, we're like, Aman Sadi, we could testify that he didn't go, this is an Ayal Vanafik guy. He was going in every day for the cash. So with the halacha is by Ayal Vanafik, it's like honey usually, right? Because the guy needs the money. But if we know that his Ayal Vanafik is for a side reason, it's not because he's desperate for cash. He's Ayal Vanafik because he's desperate to have the sale be final, because he was really trying to offload this property because it was Meicher Sadem Pnei Asa, because it wasn't a good field. So in that case is where Rava told us that it's going to be like honey. In that case is where Rava told us that it's going to be kani, because he wasn't the regular Ayal Vanafik guy. He doesn't really need the money. But in the regular case, where the guy's Ayal Vanafik because he really needs the money, yeah, that's true what we heard in the name of Rava, that the sale is void, even if there's just $1 left, because the guy only sold his field for the cash, and obviously he needs every last dollar until he gets it. He didn't mean to sell it. He needs every last dollar back. But in the case where he's Meicher Sadem Pnei Asa, even though he's Ayal Vanafik and it looks like he's the guy who's desperate for the cash, we know that he's not really there for the cash. He's just really there because he wants the guy. Once the guy pays, I don't have to give him back the money. If the guy only paid partially or some of it, then he could say the deal's off, and then you have this thing. I keep someone, this guy rather the sale just be complete and final, and I walk away with my money. So that's how we reconcile this seeming contradiction between the two statements from Rava. No, it's not a contradiction. Really, Rava holds that if you're Ayal Vanafik Gazuzi, you are like honey, and that din is true even if you're Ayal Vanafik Gazuzi for one last zuz. When did Rava say that you will be kinda if we're able to know that the Ayal Vanafik Gazuzi is not because the guy wanted money, but it's for a side reason?
You're punishing the wrong guy, right? Meaning the moicher can't back out as if he wants to back out. If his moicher stay with Rasa.
His moicher stay with Rasa. However much money he got paid, that part is never going back. The amount of cash that he got, never going back. Right. But let's say the guy's in the middle of paying and then he realizes he doesn't want this deal anymore. He can now back out, right? So then the sale will be half. So if the buyer backs out, the seller has the upper hand. So he can insist, however much you paid me, I'm not giving you back $1. Fine. But he didn't sell the rest of his property. He's desperate to keep on going because he wants to get every dollar. He wants the deal finalized.
And the fact that the Rabbi says kani means that the moicher can back out and take back his bad field and give him back the money.
In the case where he's Ayal Vanafik Gazuzi, but it was only Mipnei Ra'asa,
right. In
that case, it's as if he was Ayal Vanafik Gazuzi, and then the din is that whatever you pay, the din is fine, the deal is final, and you're not able to back out, and the rest of the money is just owed to you. The way Rav Shimon Gamliel said it. You don't have to have a written mortgage, and it's a case where the guy's not desperate for the cash. And this is like a case where the guy's not desperate for the cash. He looks like he's desperate for the cash. He's desperate for something else. He's desperate that the guy shouldn't awaken up to the reality of this.
Good. So
this
property. You would think that the Hashem would try to protect the kleina in this case.
Of the Meicher Sadeo, right?
The Meicher Sadeo Rasa. Here, it's like, no, you're forcing the kleina to hold on to the bad field because this guy was scammed.
No, we're forcing the seller. He can't say, look, I'm desperate for cash. The whole deal is like honey. You didn't.
Why would he want it back
No.
out on sale?
No, he wouldn't want to go back on the
You
deal.
want,
Right.
you wouldn't, you
Right.
wouldn't
So
want
who are
to-
we punishing?
We're locking the sale in because he does because it's not desperate for cash. But that's not really the point. That's not the depth of this sale. This sale is like a whole. It's like
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It's like you're locking it. But also, what does it mean to target shmatich?
That you should learn. Targum literally means you should translate, but it means that shmua that you heard from Rav, the name Kani, you have to tai chadain. It means like tai chadain that it was in that case. Fit it into that case, but otherwise it's differently.
Okay.
All right, now we're on top of the page of Daf Ayin Chesam and Aleph. Zakti Gemara. I want to get at least to the bottom of the page, so maybe we'll go a little quicker for this part. So Zakti Gemara. The Gemara is going to start off with Pshita. So the way this Gemara, sometimes Pshita, the word itself is a question. Here, we're going to say Pshita the following case. We're going to say a whole case is Pashutas. But the next case number 2, is where we're Mesupik. In other words, where we have a dilemma, where we have an inquiry, we have a shaila. So Zakti Gemara, Pshita, it's obvious to us that we have a guy who tried selling a small property for $100. Obviously, because he needed $100. He was trying to sell a small property for $100, and he wasn't able to find the buyer. No one was interested. So he was forced to. So what did he do? He had to put up for sale one of his larger properties. Instead, he had to go and he sold the property for $200. And this guy's going in and out. He wants the cash. In and out, in and out. This guy's going in. So we're sure that it's like honey, that unless he pays up, the deal is not going through because this guy's desperate for the cash. Because he really didn't want to sell a $200 property. He really wanted to sell only a $100 property. He was forced to sell a $200 property. And now he wants the cash badly because he wants to take that $100 that he didn't really need to liquidate. He wants to reinvest it. So it's pasha to us that he really needs the money, this guy. And therefore, if he's Kyle Vanafek Gazuzi, is because he really needs the money. And it's not like.
Or you can say fakir. He doesn't need $200.
So that's what we're bavarning. That this guy's considered, he's not considered a Meicher Sadeo. You might want to say that this guy's like Meicher Sadeo Mipneir also. Like really, he had no choice and he was forced to sell this field, and that's why he's having up. No, we're saying that he actually needs the cash at that point, even though he didn't want to sell the field and he was forced to. So he has an element, he has a component of him that's like a Meicher Sadeo Mipneir also. But at the end of the day, he actually needs the cash because he wants to reinvest it. So therefore, the din is pashatos that if he's Ayal V'nafik, the din will be like honey. However, Ella, we have a shaila, a guy who wanted to sell a field for $100, like the story before. And he couldn't find easily. He wasn't able to easily find the buyer. If he would have worked harder and listed it better and made more open houses and just worked a little harder, so Havamashkach, he would have found the buyer to sell his field for $100. But he didn't want to have the tircha. So instead of making himself crazy to find the buyer for 100, it was doable. Instead, went the easy route. He wasn't matriach. And he sold for 200. And now the Kyle Vanafik Azuzi is going in and out for the money. How do we view this guy? Maybe we should say he's like a guy who sold this field, and he's considered like a guy who sold this field mipnei ra'asa, which in that case the buyer gets to keep the field, even though the guy keeps on coming in for the money. Even though the guy's desperate coming in for the money, the buyer gets to keep the field because we're saying that he's not coming in for the money, he's desperate for the cash. This guy, he only sold it because he was lazy. So he was like, how do we say it? He was like, I'm having a hard time articulating the svara here.
I don't even understand the case yet.
So the case is where a guy needed to sell a field for $100. He needed $100 cash. Clearly, he needed $100 cash. So how much cash does he need? $100. But then he goes and he sells a field for $200. So he doesn't need the extra $100. We know that he first tried listing a field for $100. So he needs $100. He doesn't need $200. Then he put up a sale for $200. Why? Because he had a hard time selling a field for $100.
If you can't sell a field for 100, how would it be easier to sell it for 50?
Oh, because some people don't want to buy a small property. The bigger it is, the more valuable it is.
Offering more.
No, a different field. He sells a different field, or a larger piece of that same field.
Okay.
But he puts a larger piece up for sale.
Okay. So
Right.
now
So we know this about him because he originally listed it for 100. Now he's listing it. Now he lists a different piece or a larger piece for 200. Does he need $200?
He needs money.
He only needs 100 because Varaya yesterday was just trying to sell $100 worth of property. Today he sold 200. Now, why did he sell 200? So if he had no choice, like the guy before, he had no choice.
Yesterday he had one daughter engaged, and today his second daughter got engaged.
Okay, but we're not saying that, right? We're not saying that.
It's like a
We know the reason why he didn't sell yesterday. No buyers. We know the reason.
Sometimes one bedroom sells, sometimes only two sell, you know.
No, we know the reason. We know that the reason yesterday he had no buyers. So today he's like, okay, I'm trying differently. I'm putting up $200, right? And he managed, yeah. And now, and he only get now, but he keeps on going. He wants the rest of the cash. He keeps on going in and in and in and in. Is he desperate for the cash? No, he's not, because he only needs $100 cash to this guy. So on one end, he's not considered a guy who's desperate for the cash.
But he also lost $100 worth of land that for whatever.
Not lost. He's gonna get paid for it. But he's Isle of Nuffic. So do we say he's like the real Isle of Nuffic and he's desperate for the cash, and therefore if you don't pay him, the deal's bottled? Or do we say we know that he's not desperate for the cash?
Because if he was really desperate, then he would have tried harder.
Yeah, because in this case, had he tried harder yesterday or relisted that one for $100, he would have got it. So maybe he didn't care so much to have to sell because he was lazy. He could have been careful not to lose it. The guy who was forced, Taka. Yeah, sorry. So the guy who was forced to sell a $200 fill, he clearly didn't want to. The Gemara said it's pasha to us that when he goes in for that extra $100 because he wants to reinvest it. He never wanted to take it out of the land, and because he was forced to, he wants the cash back. He wants to pump it back into the land. But if this guy was so worried about pumping his cash back into the land, he should have just worked harder the other day. He had an option without selling the $200 property. On the other hand, it was hard for him, so he was a shtickle forced to. So the Gemara is not sure how to look at this guy. That's the question here. Do we look at him like he's a meicher sedem mipnei also? Or do we say that he is my also dummy, or he's not? And the answer is take you that remains a question. Now back to our Mishnah, and our Mishnah said that sachar sachamar v'sachadar. If I hired somebody to transport something for me or do a certain job for me, and then they backed out of me in the middle of the day, so the employees were the ones who backed out. So the Mishnah said there's two things you could do. Either you could rent workers on their bill. Right, so it was in the middle of doing a job. They quit. I could rent workers on their bill, even if it's going to cost me a little more. I could rent workers to finish the job, and it's going to be their responsibility. Or I could fool them. I could tell them, "Oh, I'll pay you more. Stay. I'll pay you more." Then you don't have to pay them more. So now we want to know the seicher lane, like how much I could just go and hire workers for really expensive. And they go charge those guys. They have to actually go take cash. So exactly Gemara ad kama seicher lane. To what's the limit? How much I could rent on their tab? And for the Gemara, Amrav Nachman, ad kadei scharan. Until they're schar. You can't just go forever. Basically, let's say I hired guys to do a $10 job, and they already did $5 worth. And now they quit on me. I didn't pay them yet. Now I have to get the rest of the job done for $5.
Didn't we say that you want to go much higher?
Yeah, so
like something you're gonna get a loss out of?
Yeah, so not double. Yeah. So they already did a job for $5 worth. They already did a job I didn't pay them yet, so I have the money. I didn't pay them yet. Now there's only $5 left, and I need to find workers. So I could find the worker, try to find the worker to do for $5 what it costs. I can't find it. I could go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And however much I have to go over $5, what it should have been for the second half of the job, I just don't pay the first guys what I owe them. It's a $10 job. These guys did half. I owe them $5. Now they quit. Wrongfully, they quit. So now I need to find workers to do the second half of the job. So what does it mean? I could be Seicher Leyan. I could find workers now if I could find workers for $5, that's what I'm meant to do. Finish the job. If I need to hire workers for 6, I'm going to hire workers for 6. I only owe the first guys only 4. If I have to get workers for 7, I'll pay them 7, and the first guys are going to lose out because now I only have $3 left to pay them. And 8, I'll only get 2. 9, I'll only get 1. 10, they get nothing. But I can't go to 11, 12, 13, and then come and give them the bill. I could only be Seicher Leyan up until how much I should have paid them. I could deduct off their salary. But you asked me about the Davar Avad. I believe the Mishnah here is talking about a Davar Avad. I just want to look back for a second. When the Mishnah said that, were we talking about Davar Avad? Yeah, we were talking about a Davar Avad. It's by the case of a Davar. If it's not a Davar Avad, the Mishnah said I could only have complaints. I have complaints and I have to go find new workers. It's annoying that you quit on me. Now I need to find new workers, but that's it. That's life. If it's a davar avod, I'm allowed to seicher aleim. So the Gemara's question is, to what extent? So the Gemara answers only ad kedei sechar, and I can only use the salary that I owe them. I could use that money to spend to hire workers for a more expensive price. And too bad on them; they're going to lose. I won't have to pay them, but I can't go higher and higher and higher and then charge them. So that was Rav Nachman who said that. So now Rabbi asks a question to Rav Nachman from Mishnah. It says from a brisa, brisa that we quoted before. It says other by mechamishim zuz, you could pay even 40 or 50 zuz. So Amar Lei, he tells him Kitan Yahi Shabasa Chavili Yadai. That's talking about in a case where the workers came to your house. That brisa said you could do much more money, not just kedei skaron. So he says that's talking about over there where the workers came to your house and they brought all their tools. So you're in the possession of it. It's very common. A worker comes to work in your house, he could bring hundreds of dollars worth of tools and he leaves it there. And so you have their money essentially. And now they quit on you in the middle of the day, they left the tools. So the same way you could use up their salary to pay up, you could also go against any value of any money that they left behind. But you're not able to then go and give them a bill that they have to now give you cash. That you're not able to do. Question to the crowd. It's 28. Should we do like 10 minutes and get to the bottom of the page, or should we stop because we try to stick to an hour share? If everybody has 10 minutes, we'll go to the bottom of the page. All right. So this is the second Mishnah of Perek Hasocher. And this Mishnah is talking about Seicher, where I rent something. So there's Dalet Shemrim, everybody knows there's a Shemer Chinam who watches something for free, the Shemer Hasocher watches something to get paid, and then there's the Seicher, is the guy who rents. The guy who rents, so one end he's paying, he's not getting paid to watch it, he's paying to use this item, but while he uses it, he also needs to watch it and take good care of it. And if he doesn't, he's held responsible. So if he does a pshia, he's going to be chayev. If it's going to be an einus, he's going to be pater. And if it's going to be gneva v'aveda, it's actually a machlekes, because one opinion of the Tanaim is that a seicher has a din like a shemer chinam, so then he's pater and gneva v'aveda. So he's not getting paid to watch it. If anything, he's paying to use it. So one of a Tana holds he has a din of a shemer chinam, one Tana holds a din of a shemer sacher. So if it's gneva v'aveda, it's a machlekes. If it's a pshia, of course you're chayev. You can't be negligent. And if it's an einus, you're of course pater. Because whether you have a din like a shemer chinam or shemer sacher, they're both pater on if an einus happened over here, right? Died, something crazy happened. It's einus. So now we have a story where a guy rents a donkey from a guy, and we can do the Mishnah inside. Let's do the Mishnah inside. Second Mishnah of Perek Hasocher. Hasocher is hachamayir. Somebody rents a donkey, leilichai bahar, and he made up with the owner that he's only going to use this donkey to go on a mountain. But then the renter didn't keep his part of the deal, and he took it in a valley. Or bibika, he made up with the owner that he's going to take it in a valley. And he ended up taking the donkey onto a mountain. Even if they're both the same distance, it wasn't like one route was longer, one route was less. You changed the route from where you were meant to go, Mesa, and then an einus transpired. Chayev, you're going to be chayev because you changed the deal. Had the seicher kept the deal, he would be pater on einus. But because he changed the deal, he's going to be chayev on einus. This is the reisha of this Mishnah. The reisha of this Mishnah makes a blanket statement. I'm highlighting that because this is the Gemara that we're going to do right here. It's a blanket statement that if I rented it for one area and I took it to the other area that we didn't make up, I could take it to, or vice versa, I'm going to always be chayav. Now comes the seifa, the second half of the Mishnah. The seifa starts getting technical about what's the cause of death. So the seifa, similar case. I rented a donkey bahar to take it on a mountain and I didn't listen to the agreement. And I took it into a valley. So now it will depend on the cause of death. If it slipped when I took it into the valley, I'm going to be pater. Because going up a mountain is more slippery than a bika. So if you agree that I can take it in the mountain, which was very slippery, you obviously didn't mind, and now it slipped in the bika, I'm going to be pater. The reason why, by me changing to the bika, I made the situation better, not worse. So I'm going to be pater. However, if it died from overheating, valleys are very, very hot. Mountains could be maybe cooler up on top. So if it overheated and I took it to the valley, then I'm going to be chayev because the guy's going to say, I told you to take it to the mountain. I know my animal doesn't belong in the valley. You're going to be chayev. We have to look at what the cause of death was. Did it die from hichlika, slipping, or huchama, from overheating? Vice versa will be the opposite. Vice versa will be the opposite. Leilicha bebika, I rented it to go into a valley, and then I changed. Leilicha bahar, and I took it onto the har. So we're in the beginning of the first word of the line is im ichlika. If it slipped, I'm going to be chayev. So I made the situation worse. I took it to a mountain, which is more slippery. I'm going to be chayev. But if it overheated, I'm going to be pater. I took it to a mountain. It's much better than the valley, so I'm going to be pater. However, im machmas hamayla, if it overheated because of the climbing up the mountain, so then I'm going to be chayev. Now, Taisvus explains, you could tell if the animal died because it's climbing up the mountain. You see it pasha schwitzing and working hard. So in that case, if you went from a bika to a mountain, you made it much worse for the animal. Or it could be that it was huchama, climbed up the mountain with ease. It wasn't such a steep mountain. Then on top, it was baking in the sun and it died from heat. In that case, the guy says, listen, it died on top of the mountain. In the valley would have been much worse. So you could tell how it died if it's machmas hamayla of overeating, or it's just the huchama of the regular sun beating on the animal, which in that case, a mountain is better than a valley. Now the Bryce the Mishnah has another little part. The Mishnah says, if I rent a donkey, vivrika, and it went blind. All of a sudden, the donkey just went blind, an unusual event. Or those days, the king, they had these laws that they could just take over your possessions. In the name of the country, in the name of a war, they could make use of your house, use it for the soldiers, take your car, take your animals. So I rented a donkey to you, and you're going down the street, and then the government stops you and says, hey, we need to use this donkey for today. And they just take it away from you. So then, do I need to provide a new car to you, right? Imagine Enterprise rents a car to me and the engine doesn't work. I could call them, they have to bring me a new car. Here, the guy rents a donkey to me and it goes blind. Or he rents a donkey to me and the government takes it away. It's up to the Mishnah. The owner, the renter, the enterprise company could just say, here's your animal, it's your mazel, it's your bad luck. It went blind, so that's it. You have a blind animal, too bad. The government took it, so I still rented it to you. It's not my problem. However, Mesa, if the animal died, I rented an animal to you and it died. Or it broke, something about it, his legs broke or his hands broke, it couldn't work. So then I'm of course patur because of ayin has happened. I don't have to pay you back. That's not even the question. What the Mishnah is saying is the chayiv lahamid lechamayr. I need to now provide. I have to send you a new car. I have to provide a new car to you. So that's the Mishnah. So the Gemara's first question is going to be a very, very obvious question. The Reisha and the Seif of our Mishnah have a contradiction. The Reisha of our Mishnah said that if you change, you're always chayiv. If I hired it Leilicha Bahar and I took it to Bika, if I rented it for Bika, I took it to Har Yechayev. We don't get into, what's the cause of that? Was it Ichlika? Was it Huchama? It makes no difference to us. We say Yechayev, blanket statement. Comes the Seifa, the same Seifa of the same Mishnah. It says the same case, the Seicha is the Chamar Leilicha Bahar, Leilicha Bebika, Bebika Leilicha Bahar, and it says the same exact case. And then the Gemara will say, well, it depends. You have to look at the cause of death. If it was heat, well, then it will depend if it's mountain to valley or valley to mountain. If it was slipping, if it was from the climbing. So what's going on here? Are you always chayiv, or are you chayiv? Does it depend? When you're chayiv, or are you always chayiv? That's the Gemara's question, and the Gemara is going to provide 4 answers. So obviously, what the answer is going to be is that the Seifa and Reisha are talking about different cases. That's how you usually resolve a contradiction. The Reisha and Seifa are talking about different cases. In the Seifa, we know the case. We don't have to attribute anything to the Mishnah. The case is that it died from a chlika or uchama, and in the Seifa, it died from a completely different cause. So when the Reisha was saying that you're chayiv, it was talking about a specific, it is something specific that it didn't say clearly, and we're taiching nine. The Gemara will give 3 answers like that either the Reisha is talking about this, that, or the other. And then the Gemara gives a 4th answer that actually this Reisha and Seifa, you're right, it looks like they're saying different dinim. It's actually a machlaikas. It's 2 different tanaim. It's Rameir and Chachamim are having an argument. It just didn't say their names in the Mishnah. So we'll do that Gemara inside. We'll get to the bottom of the page for today. Frag the Gemara, Ma'ishna Reisha Deloika Maflig, Ma'ishna Seifa the Kamaflig. What's the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa? That in the Reisha he does differentiate. Sorry, that in the Seifa he does differentiate how it died, and it will depend if you're chayiv or patur on the cause of death. And the Seifa he does not differentiate. He says you're always chayiv. And for the Gemara, Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai is talking about the Reisha, that in the Reisha, we're talking about that it died in a specific way. Shemesa machmas avir, it died because of the ear. The ear in a valley and a mountain are very different. Like in a mountain, the ear is very, very thin. I remember when I was in yeshiva, we went once on a hike and someone mamish couldn't breathe. Once we got to a certain elevation, we have to call, not Atzala, but 911 or whatever it was. It wasn't simple. It's a different ear. and a valley has a different ear. So the guy could always say, Damrina, the owner could say, listen, I told you to go to the mountain, not the valley. Or I told you to go to the valley, not the mountain. Avira the har katla, Damrina, or I could say Avira the bika katla. I could always say that the climate, the ear, the quality killed my animal. That's what the Reish is talking about, where the guy's claiming that the ear killed the animal. But in the Seifa, we're talking about that the animal clearly died from slipping or from overheating. The Reisha died from breathing a certain ear. So it's different cases. So in the Reisha, you're always chayiv. And in the Seifa, well, you're chayiv for Chlika Ruchman, depending if you switch from Bika to Har or Har to Bika, because it does depend. That's the first answer. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Amar, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, Kued Shemesa Machmas Uftzna, that it died from a certain type of exhaustion, that it got exhausted. So the guy can say, my animal gets exhausted when it has to go down into the valley, or my animal gets exhausted when it goes onto the mountain. And either way, it's a problem. You did the one that my animal's not up to. But in the Seifa, we know how it died from either tripping or overheating. The third answer is Rabbi. We're talking about that it died because a snake bit it and it died. So the guy will say, listen, had you listened to me and gone on the Har, there would have not been a snake there. You took it to the Bika, a snake bit it, or vice versa. Had you listened to me and gone into the Bika, maybe there would have not been a snake there. You took it to the Har, it's your problem. You went off route, something went wrong. I could always claim that would have not happened. Had you listened to me, that would have not happened. In the Seifa, we know how it died. It died from Chulka or Huchma. And over there, it will depend if you switch from Har to Bika or Bika to Har. In the Reisha, it won't depend if you switch from Har to Bika or Bika to Har, because whichever one you did, I'm going to say the snake would have not bit it in the other place. And the fourth answer is, Reb Chia bar Abba Amar Reb Yechanan. Reb Chia bar Abba says in the name of Reb Yechanan, Hamani Rameir he. Who's the Tan of our Reisha? It's Rameir. Basically, this answer is saying that we're actually, the Reisha and Sefer are stira, yeah. Like every machlekes is a stira. It's two different opinions. The Reisha is Rameir, because Rameir holds, the Amar, he says, Kala Mavrel Das Shal Balabayis. Whoever changes, deviates a little bit from what the Balabayis told you to do, Nikar Gazlan, he gives a very harsh din that you're considered a Gazlan. So once you're a Gazlan, you stole it. Basically, you acquired it. It's yours. You got to pay me back in full. I don't care what happened. Biggest einus in the world could have happened. You steal something from me, you're mechuyev to pay me back. The biggest einus in the world can happen. You're not going to be exempt from paying me back. So the Reisha goes according to a mayor who says Kalam Avra Das Balbayis. We go as far to say that he's considered a Gazlan. So therefore, we don't care what the story is. You're a Gazlan, pay up in full. The Seifa is Chachamim. Chachamim don't say that if you change from what you were meant to do, you went from Bika to Har to Bika, you're considered a Gazlan. They don't consider you a Gazlan. And they'll say it depends on the cause of death. If it makes sense that you're more guilty, you'll be more guilty. And if it makes sense that you're not more guilty, you're not going to be more guilty. So that's what we're holding. We're holding on top of the page. We're holding the words, Hey Rabbi Meir. The next Gemara is going to say, where did you get this from? The Rameir holds that Kol HaMavra Das Balbayis Nikra Gazlan, that if you change a little from what the owner told you, we give you this harsh din that you're considered a Gazlan. Where do you see that? We start quoting different Rameirs and different Mishnahs. We try to find the Rameir who says that. But we're going to pause over here for today by Hey Rameir. Shekayach to everybody for joining you.
Is there an Indian halacha l'maisa when you pay a loan, you should pay